If you run IT for a company, if you work on a security team, or if you're simply the person who would actually get the call, this one is for you. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what happens in a ransomware incident response, in order from the first alert to the post-incident review. Not the theory, the real sequence. What you touch first, what you must not touch, and which decisions you cannot take back. For every phase, I'll give you 5 things. The tools, and when to pick which one. The steps in order. The real command on screen. The number you measure afterwards. And the mistake most teams make. At the end, you'll have a 30, 60, 90-day plan and a self-check to see where your own organization actually stands. Here is why the order matters so much. 3 in the morning. The on-call phone goes off. A file server is throwing errors, and somebody on the night shift says documents are opening as garbage. 20 minutes later, the help desk queue has 40 tickets in it, and there is a text file sitting on every desktop. By the time anyone in that building says the word ransomware, the attacker has already been inside the network for 4 days, has already copied the data out, and is watching the response happen in real time. And everything the team does in the next hour will either preserve the evidence or destroy it. That's really the whole point of this video. In an incident, the difference between a company that recovers in days and one that's still limping months later is almost never the tooling budget. It's whether the first hour was done in the right order. 2 numbers set the clock on all of this. The first, median dwell time, how long attackers sit inside a network before anyone finds them, runs at about 14 days across all intrusions, according to Mandiant. But in ransomware cases specifically, it's much tighter. Sophos, looking at their own incident response work, put the median at around 4 days. That is your entire window. The second number is newer, and it's worse. Mandiant measured the median handoff between the crew that breaks in and the crew that encrypts at 22 seconds. Not the fastest case they saw, the middle one. So this is not a leisurely investigation. It's a timed exercise where the wrong first move costs you the case. Phase 1. The first 10 minutes. And the single most important thing I can tell you about the first 10 minutes is that you do not start with forensics. You start by declaring. 5 steps, in this order. 1. Confirm it's real. Encryption, not a failed backup job and not a storage fault. And yes, both of those have started full incident responses. 2. Declare the incident and name an incident commander. 1 person, said out loud, so everybody knows who is making calls. 3. Start the decision log, timestamped, every action, who authorized it. 4. Move communications out of band. 5. Scope it roughly. How many hosts, which network segments, and the question that changes everything. Is a domain controller affected? The tools, and when to pick which. If you have EDR, Defender XDR, CrowdStrike, Sentinel-1, that console is your fastest view of the whole fleet, so start there. If you don't have EDR, or you need an artifact it simply doesn't collect, Velociraptor is the answer. It's free, it's agent-based, and it will query hundreds of machines in minutes. And the third tool is the one nobody expects me to say, a printed runbook. Printed, because the wiki with your incident procedure in it is very often sitting on the domain that just got encrypted. Here's a real one. This is Velociraptor's query language, and this single query hunts for the ransom node across every machine you have agents on at once. You are not looking for the malware yet. You're answering one question. How far has this actually spread? That number decides everything that follows. The number to measure afterwards. Time to declare. From the first alert to a named incident commander. Target is under 15 minutes. Almost nobody hits it the first time, and that's fine. The point is that it's a number you can put on a wall and improve. If you don't measure it, every incident feels like it went about the same, which is how organizations stay bad at this for a decade. And the mistakes. There are 2 here, and I've seen both more than once. The first, doing forensics before declaring. 1 senior engineer disappears into 1 laptop for 2 hours, being genuinely brilliant, while the encryption spreads across 3 more segments. The second is worse, coordinating the entire response over company email and Teams, while the attacker is still sitting in that mailbox reading it. Out of band means a genuinely different system. Personal phones, Signal, a bridge number agreed in advance. Phase 2. Preserve before you break anything. From this moment on, Almost everything you do destroys something else, so you need to know the order. It's called the order of volatility, and it just means capture the things that vanish fastest, first. Memory first, on the most interesting hosts. Then triage artifacts, event logs, registry, the master file table, prefetch. Then full disk images, and only if you actually need them for litigation or an insurance claim. Hash everything as you go, record who handled what, and write it to media you can't quietly change later. And here is the hard rule of this phase. Do not pull the power. I know the instinct. Something is eating your files, and every reflex has cut the cord. But memory dies with the power, and memory can be holding the encryption keys, the full process tree, and the live connections back to the attacker's infrastructure. There have been real cases where the key was recoverable from RAM, and somebody switched the machine off. Network isolate instead. Same containment, none of the loss. Tools, and when to pick which. WinPMEM or dump it for memory capture on a single box. CAPE for targeted triage collection, 5 to 15 minutes per host and a few gigabytes, instead of a 500 gigabyte disk image you'll never have time to process. Velociraptor to do that same collection remotely across hundreds of machines without walking to any of them. And a full forensic image with FTK Imager or DD only when you know a lawyer is eventually going to look at it. This is the CAPE command that does it. The target there, the SANS triage target, is a curated list of the artifacts that actually matter, so you're not deciding under pressure at 4 in the morning what to collect. It writes out a single container file per machine, named for that machine, which matters more than it sounds like when you've got 30 of them. The number, the percentage of in-scope hosts you triaged before anybody re-imaged them. Target is 100% of the interesting ones, and at absolute minimum, 3 machines. Patient 0, 1 host they moved laterally to, and a domain controller. Miss those 3 and you will never be able to answer how they got in, which means you can't prove it's fixed. The mistake, re-imaging patient 0 on day 1, because the business wants that machine back. It is almost always an executive's laptop, and there is almost always pressure. But that machine is the only record of how they got in. Image it first or rebuild it last, and do not let the decision be made by whoever is shouting the loudest, which is the actual failure mode in most organizations. Phase 3. Build the timeline and find patient 0. And the mental shift here is the one that separates people who've done this from people who haven't. You are not investigating the encrypted machines. The encrypted machines are the last page of the book. 5 steps. Pull the event logs from your domain controllers, from the VPN or edge device, and from the host you triaged. Run a Sigma-based timeline across all of it at once. Filter to high and critical, then pivot outward from every hit. Same account, same host, same hour. Cross-reference the file system, because attackers clear logs, but they rarely clean the master file table. Then merge everything into one master timeline, and mark the earliest confirmed attacker action. Tools, and when to pick which. Hayabusa is the fastest way to turn a pile of event logs into a ranked timeline, so start there. Chainsaw does a similar job, and is stronger when you're hunting a specific rule or searching for a known string. Eric Zimmerman's tools, MFTECMD, PCMD, AMCake Parser, give you file system and registry truth when the logs have been wiped. TimeSketch or Timeline Explorer is where the merged super timeline actually lives. And Volatility 3, for memory, when you need the process tree that nothing ever wrote to a log. 2 commands. The first turns a directory of event logs into a single ranked CSV timeline. The second runs the whole Sigma rule set across the same data as a hunt. Between them, you go from tens of thousands of unreadable events to a few dozen things worth a human's attention. And that reduction is the entire job in this phase. These are the events that actually matter, and it's worth knowing them by number. 4624 and 4625, successful and failed logons. Watch logon type 3, which is network, and type 10, which is remote desktop. 4648, explicit credential use, which is what running something as another user looks like. 7045, a new service installed, a classic. 4698, a new scheduled task. Sysmon 1, 3 and 11 for process, network and file. PowerShell 4104 for script blocks. And 1102. The security log was cleared. That one isn't a clue. It's a confession. Assembled, it looks like this. A VPN log on at 2 in the morning from a country the company doesn't operate in, using a service account that should never log in interactively. Then discovery commands. Then a new service on a second host. Then, 4 days later, the encryption. The story reads backwards from the disaster to a single unremarkable login. And that login is what your report is actually about. The number, the dwell time you actually discover. Compare it against that 4-day benchmark. If your answer comes back as 60 days, then the real finding of this incident is not the ransomware at all. It's that your detection does not work, and the ransomware is simply the first attacker who was noisy enough to get noticed. The mistake, and it's a subtle one, trusting the timestamp on the ransom note as the date of the attack. That is the last day, not the first. Teams scope the investigation to that week, find nothing upstream, and declare it contained, while the account that was actually compromised a month earlier is still live. And the related version, starting the investigation from the encrypted file server, rather than from the identity that logged into it. Phase 4. Containment. And this is the phase where I see competent teams lose the incident. Containment has 3 layers: network, host, and identity. Almost everybody does the first 2 well, because they're visible and they feel like action. And then they skip the third, and the attacker simply walks back in through the front door because the credentials still work. So in order, isolate the affected hosts, using EDR isolation, which keeps your own agent talking while killing everything else. Block the command and control at your egress point. Disable the compromised accounts, and critically, revoke their live sessions and tokens, because disabling an account does not log out a session that's already running. Cut the path to Tier 0, your domain admin tier. Reset krbtgt twice, with a gap, and only then do you start eradicating. Here are the actual commands. Disable the account. Revoke the sign-in sessions. That's the graph command for intra ID, and it's the one people forget. And then the krbtgt reset, run twice, at least 10 hours apart. Why twice? A golden ticket is forged using the krbtgt account's password hash. Get that hash, and you can min a ticket for anyone, including a domain admin who doesn't exist. Now, Kerberos deliberately keeps the previous key valid so that resetting it doesn't break every ticket in the estate at once. Which means one reset leaves the attacker's forged tickets working perfectly. 2 resets invalidate them. But run those 2 resets too close together and you break replication between your domain controllers. So leave at least 10 hours, or 1 maximum ticket lifetime, in between. Twice, with a gap. That's the rule. The number, time to contain. From declaration to the last observed attacker action. Write it down every time. It is the single number that most reliably improves once a team has been through this once. And it's the one your board will eventually ask for. The mistake. And this is the one from the top of the section. Containing machines, but not identities. The hosts are isolated. The graphs go quiet. Everyone exhales, and 90 minutes later the attacker logs straight back and over the VPN, using the same service account nobody disabled. And the second version, resetting krbtgt exactly once, and believing you're finished. Phase 5. Eradication. And the principle is short. Rebuild, don't clean. If a machine ran attacker code, it gets flattened. Not disinfected, not scanned twice and blessed. Flattened. In order, patch or remove the initial access vector first, before anything else, because otherwise you are carefully rebuilding machines and putting them back behind the same open door. Rebuild from known good images. Hunt persistence everywhere, not just on the host you already know about. Reset credentials across the board, service accounts included, and those are the ones that get missed. And verify. ED are installed and actually reporting before a rebuilt machine is allowed back on the network. This is where persistence hides, and you should read this list as a hunting checklist. Scheduled tasks, new services, run keys, WMI event subscriptions, badly underrated, and most teams never look. GPO startup scripts, which spread themselves for you. New local administrators, SSH authorized keys, and then the category that catches everyone. perfectly legitimate remote access tools the attacker installed on purpose. AnyDesk, ScreenConnect, TeamViewer, RMM agents. They look exactly like IT tooling. That is precisely why they're used. 2 quick commands that find a surprising amount. Recently created scheduled tasks and a full autoruns dump to CSV so you can diff it against a known good machine. Diffing is the trick. On its own, an autoruns output is noise. Next to a clean build of the same image, the attacker's entry jumps out. The number, how many persistence mechanisms you found. And here's the useful framing. If the answer is 0, you have not looked hard enough. Go back. A crew that spent 4 days inside a network did not leave one way in. They left several, deliberately, precisely because they expect you to find the first one and stop. The mistake, eradicating before scoping, is actually finished. You start pulling their access while they still have a foothold somewhere you haven't found, and you've now told them you're onto them. What comes back is a second wave, faster and considerably angrier than the first, and this time they go for the backups. Phase 6. Recovery, which has a strict dependency order and enormous business pressure trying to break it. Identity first. Active Directory, before anything else, because essentially nothing else authenticates without it. Then core infrastructure, DNS, DHCP, certificate services. Then your business-critical applications. Then everything else. Every single time this order gets inverted, it's for the same reason. Somebody senior wants one specific application back, and it's restored into a domain that isn't ready to hold it. Every tier passes the same gate before it's allowed to reconnect. Rebuilt from known good. Patched. ED are installed and reporting. Credentials rotated. Monitoring confirmed live, not configured, confirmed. 5 checks, and they are not negotiable per system, because the exception is always the system that reinfects everything else. And that gate is a command, not a conversation. Before a rebuilt machine is allowed back on the network, you check that the sensor service is actually running, that real-time protection is genuinely on, that the patches went on, and the one that matters, that the thing is checking in. An agent installed but not reporting is the single most common way a host gets waved through the gate while being effectively invisible. And your backups, assume they were targeted, because they were. Modern crews hunt backup infrastructure specifically. Veeam vulnerabilities sit right there in the Akira exploitation set alongside the VPN ones. So restore into an isolated network first. Scan it there. Only then reconnect it. And check the backup itself doesn't contain the persistence. Because if they were inside for 4 days, then your last 4 days of backups may faithfully include their scheduled task. The number, actual recovery time against your planned RTO, measured per tier, plus time to the first real business transaction, which is the one the business actually cares about. Most organizations discover during their first real incident that the documented RTO was, politely, aspirational. 2 mistakes. Restoring into the same compromised domain and reinfecting within days, which is heartbreaking to watch, because the team has usually just worked 100 hours. And the other, never having tested a restore and finding out in the middle of the worst week of your career that the backup job has been silently failing for 5 months. Phase 7. Data theft and the extortion decision. Encryption is the loud half of a ransomware incident. The quiet half is the copy they took days earlier, and that's the half with the legal consequences. In order, look for staging, unusually large archives sitting in temp directories. Look for the transfer tools. Confirm it from network telemetry, outbound volume, destination, timing. Then determine what was actually in it. Not what could conceivably have been in it, what was. And then legal, your insurer, law enforcement, and your regulator, in that order, and early. This is what exfiltration looks like. On disk, rclone, megasync, WinSCP, FileZilla, or just plain 7-zip archives staged in Windows temp or perflogs. On the wire, a spike in outbound bytes to a cloud storage provider your company doesn't use, and long sessions at hours when nobody works. It is genuinely one of the most detectable things an attacker does, which is why it's so painful that it's so rarely alerted on. And this is how you find it after the fact, from Zeek connection logs, top outbound talkers by bytes sent, 20 lines of output, And the answer is usually sitting in the top 3, at a volume that should have triggered something months before anyone was encrypted. Now the decision itself, and I want to be careful and factual here. Paying does not discharge your notification obligations. It also doesn't guarantee deletion. What you are buying is a promise from a criminal that they deleted a copy you can never verify. Under GDPR, the 72-hour clock to notify your supervisory authority starts when you become aware, not when you finish investigating. And involve legal and your insurer before you talk to anybody, because under many policies, talking first can void the coverage. The number, hours from awareness to the notification decision being made. Not made correctly, just made, consciously, by a named person. Ambiguity is what turns a security incident into a regulatory problem, and regulators are markedly more forgiving of a documented decision than of a silence. The mistake. Opening negotiations before you know what was actually taken. You have no leverage, no facts, and everything you say becomes evidence in the regulatory process and quite possibly in litigation. Know first, talk second. Phase 8. The post-incident review, the phase that decides whether all of this happens to you again next year. For steps, hold a blameless review within 2 weeks, while people still remember what they actually did rather than what they wish they'd done. Turn every finding into a dated action with a named owner, not a paragraph in a document. Turn every missed detection into a written detection rule, and remeasure at 90 days, because otherwise none of it happened. And this is what turning a miss into a detection looks like. A short sigma rule for a new service installed by an account that has no business installing services. Event 7045, which was sitting in your logs the whole time during the incident, unread. That rule is worth more than the 90-page report. The number, percentage of review findings actually closed at 90 days, alongside the trend in mean time to detect. If MTTD hasn't moved by the next incident, then the review was theater, expensive, well-attended, beautifully formatted theater. The mistake, the 90-page report that nobody implements. And its ugly cousin, blaming the person who clicked the thing. Do that once, publicly, and you have guaranteed that the next person who clicks something sits on it for 6 hours hoping it goes away. Those 6 hours are worth more to an attacker than any exploit. So the plan. First 30 days, and the assumption behind these is simple. This happens tomorrow. A printed incident contact list and an out-of-band communications channel agreed in advance, so nobody is inventing one at 3 in the morning. ED are on 100% of endpoints, including servers, which is where the gap almost always is. Multi-factor on every remote access path, with no exception carved out for service accounts, because that exception is the one that gets used. And one offline or immutable backup copy, verified by an actual restore test. Days 30 to 60, build the ability to investigate. Centralize your logs, Windows event logs, firewall, and identity, with 90 days of retention minimum, because a 4-day dwell time is the good case, and you will eventually chase one that's months long. Deploy Velociraptor or equivalent, so you can triage the fleet without physical access. Separate your Tier 0 admin accounts from daily driver accounts. And run a tabletop exercise with the executive team, not just IT, because the decisions in Phase 7 are theirs, and you do not want the first time they think about it to be live. Days 60 to 90, prove it works. Know who you call at 3 in the morning, an I or retainer, or at minimum a named firm that already has your details on file, because the worst time to be filling in a new vendor form is during an incident. Measure real restore time for your top 5 systems. Write detections for the techniques in this video: new service installed, security log cleared, krbtgt anomalies, rclone execution. And then purple team the whole chain end to end, so you find out which of these is quietly broken while it's still cheap to find out. And finally, the self-check. 5 questions. Count your honest yes. 1. Can you name, right now, the person who declares an incident? 2. Could you collect forensic triage from 50 hosts within an hour, without physically touching them? 3. If Active Directory were encrypted tonight, is the recovery plan available offline? 4. Have you restored your most important system from backup in the last 6 months? Actually restored it, not verified that the job said success? 5. Do you know your dwell time from your last incident? 0 to 1. You are relying on luck, and luck has a poor track record here. 2 to 3. You'll survive it, expensively, and the survival will be down to individuals working absurd hours. 4 to 5. You're ahead of most organizations your size, and you should spend your effort on shortening detection, because that's the number that still moves. One last thing. In Phase 5, I mentioned remote support tools. AnyDesk, ScreenConnect, are MM agents, being reinstalled by attackers because they look like legitimate IT software. There's a video on this channel about a remote support platform that scored a perfect 10 out of 10, where that exact software was the way in rather than the way back in. If this video was useful to you, that one is the natural next watch, and it's on screen now.